There's still a national fascination with and affection for the railroads. It's the old tradition of the great iron horse belching its way westward, opening up the prairies and then on through the Rockies to the coast. And why not? It's one of the epic frontier stories, as Canadian as the RCMP, and forever a vital, colorful chapter of our history that has made the railroad into a truly national institution. Far more than a railroad today, Canadian Pacific is a gigantic conglomerate. It controls steel mills and mining interests, paper companies and oil wells, an airline, real estate and hotel chains. A vast company with assets of well over $5 billion, but still a railroad and a vital part of Canada's rail system. In 1979, so long after it blazed its historic trail to the west, the CPR is also a railroad system in some disrepair. As the 70s ended, Canadian railroads had an unenviable record of an average 300 derailments a year. The accident rate, in fact, had increased 51% compared to an increase in rail traffic of only 35%. But as discouraged passengers had increasingly given up on rail service, the toll on the rails attracted little public attention. Experts warned of badly antiquated rolling stock, poorly maintained track, and repeated safety deficiencies discovered in inspections by Canadian Transport Commission inspectors. And increasingly, Canadian Railroad's cargo was becoming more and more deadly as the spillover and products of our intensely industrialized society rode the rails governed only by a lax hodgepodge of federal and provincial legislation. No legislation, for example, prevented the coupling of tanker cars of dangerous chemicals and byproducts with other cars loaded with high explosives. Once there had been such legislation before Parliament to enforce labeling of shipments, but it died on the House of Commons order paper when the politicians called an election, and it never reappeared. There was no need to label the 106 cars on CPR's train number 54 as it pulled out of London, Ontario on Saturday, November the 10th. It carried cars loaded with propane, butane, caustic soda, styrene, toxic solvents, and chlorine. Down the track, the mushrooming suburban Toronto city of Mississauga slumbered into an unusually warm November weekend, oblivious as usual of the Canadian Pacific and Canadian National tracks that cut across its sprawl of suburban bungalows and light manufacturing plants. For Mississauga, the railroad didn't mean the two mainline tracks following the curve of Lake Ontario. It meant the GO train commuter station that daily ferried thousands between Toronto and their dormitory hometown on its outskirts. It had grown up north from the lakefront and the old cottage communities such as Port Credit into a faceless sprawl of development that followed the burgeoning growth between Toronto and Hamilton. A bedroom community if ever there was one, but one that in the space of a few horrifying days was to discover more sense of identity and community than it had ever been able to wrest from the Toronto colossus to the east.
Let's get out there, let's do it to them before they do it to us.
Hill Street Blues rolls into action. Global's got it Thursdays.
There's a brand new club in town, Wendy's New Chicken Club. And Wendy's doesn't serve just any chicken in this club, only boneless breast of chicken with sizzling strips of bacon, cool iceberg lettuce, juicy tomato, all jazzed up with mayo. Consider this an invitation to Wendy's Chicken Club.
That's fresh, that's class, that's Wendy's.
Add Direct Film, smiles are serious business. Here's an offer that'll make you smile. Right now, Direct Film is selling Kodak video cassettes at a price that's a joke. Only $9.99. A video venture that'll raise a few smiles. Kodak's high quality, Direct Film's low price. Only $9.99. At Direct Film, every smile is picture perfect. Direct Film. It's always better in the pictures.
Again?
Oh, no.
Not this.
Excess gas can cause anyone discomfort. But new chewable Gas X tablets relieve stomach and intestinal gas fast. Painful gas bubbles are much like beer bubbles. Add Gas X and see what happens. Without Gas X, little change. But with Gas X, the bubbles break up fast. So, for fast relief from excess gas, get Gas X, a single-purpose medicine. Fast relief for everyone.
Near the tiny town of Cooksville, on a train Toronto bound, it was midnight and the city slumbered on. The wailing whistle filled the night, its ghostly plaintive sound told the tragedy could strike before the dawn. Night was on a routine run like many times before, when the axle on the middle tank car failed. And the blast that followed filled the quiet night air with a roar as a dozen gas-filled canisters derailed. There's a million miles of rail between the mountains and the sea, and the mighty railroad touches everyone. Like the night the fire that lit the midnight sky for all to see, left a cloud that blanked the Mississauga sun.
It came at 11:56 p.m., the roar of an explosion, and over a little used crossing on Mavis Road, a fireball that lit up the city down to the lakefront. Mississauga faced a disaster potential that could, quite conceivably, dwarf any other calamity in Canadian history. It responded with a solution that was just as unparalleled: the evacuation of an entire city, 250,000 people. The next 5 days were days of drama and dread, as firefighters and chemical company experts diced with a time bomb in the crumpled shape of a railroad tanker car lying amid the wreckage at the Mavis Road crossing. There were stories of heroism, dedication, courage, and calm that, with the help of the weather and some good old-fashioned luck, turned the Mississauga accident into a brush with disaster rather than a catastrophe.
250,000 people left their houses in the night. 100 firemen tried to quench the blaze, and the families who had left behind that flaming fiery sight were banished from their home for 7 days. They fiercely fought the fire through that long remembrance day, trying to contain the deadly chlorine gas, while the sound of prayer on the morning air told of millions far away who had lost their loved ones the same way in the past. There's a million miles of rail between the mountains and the sea, and the mighty railroad touches everyone. Like the night the fire that lit the midnight sky for all to see, left a cloud that blanked the Mississauga sun.
We've never had a sensation like that before. At first we thought we were going to get killed by the train hitting us, and the next thing we knew we had this series of tank cars, which we knew to be tank cars. We didn't know what was in them. And there's enormous amount of flame coming, and nobody there, just us running.
We were going to be blowing up.
We thought the flames had subsided a little bit. We started to come back again, and then a policeman came running down the street with a dog, and he said, when it does that, run, it's going to level everything.
This was the scene at Mavis Road, only a few blocks from the big Square One shopping mall that serves as a focal point for Mississauga, even though it's on the northern fringe of the city's development. The wreckage of Train 54's deadly string of propane and chemical cars derailed into a crumpled heap after leaping the tracks. Investigators believe a hot box and overheated, unlubricated axle bearing caused the crash, and sent a pair of red-hot wheels hurtling into a nearby backyard. The fireball came from a car of propane gas that blew up as it careened off the tracks. Another propane car is still burning, and a few feet away from it, a gas tanker car that had been carrying 90 tons of chlorine. Chlorine is the liquid we now dump in swimming pools. It's also the chemical that in deadly gas form killed thousands in the trenches of the First World War. Firefighters and experts discovered that much of the deadly cargo was blown 4,000 feet into the air as a greenish-yellow gas when the propane tanker exploded. Now it hangs in the air, falling back to Earth in choking pockets that burn the throat and eyes. It has a pungent odor that makes you cough and gag, and the power to burn out your lungs if you breathe in enough of it. What's left of the gas in the punctured tanker car is still escaping into the atmosphere. Already the smell hangs over much of the city. And now, as reinforcements of police, firefighters, ambulance drivers, and relief workers flood into Mississauga, 700 of them in all, in their thousands, residents begin to leave. Behind the decision to evacuate, in stages beginning with residents closest to the crossing, were doomsday scenarios printed out by Dow Chemical Company computers. In Sarnia, Michigan, and Louisiana, the computers calculated catastrophe if the chlorine tanker car exploded. Eventually, the evacuated area included part of Oakville, and portions of Metro Toronto and Hamilton were put on evacuation alerts.
You're the Canada in Petro-Canada. You own the place. You're the Canada in Petro-Canada. You're that smiling face. You're the one we're fresh and bright for. That special friend we do it right for. You're the reason we're good at pleasing. You are Petro-Canada. Round the corner most every day, we'll help you on your way. You are Petro-Canada. We're working for you.
Petro-Canada, putting Canada first. There's a brand new club in town, Wendy's new chicken club. And Wendy's doesn't serve just any chicken in this club, only boneless breasted chicken with sizzling strips of bacon, cool iceberg lettuce, juicy tomato, all jazzed up with mayo. Consider this an invitation to Wendy's Chicken Club.
That's fresh, that's class, that's Wendy's.
While we think that the risk is very remote in not leaving, we think that we have a responsibility to indicate to the people in this area that there is a risk, however remote, and that this is the agreed recommendation after consulting with Chief Burrows and Deputy Commissioner Erskine and many others who have been intimately involved in this situation. This is our agreed recommendation to the public in this area.
Well, I believe that for the health and safety of the people, you try not to gamble.
Heading the Crisis Command Center was Roy McMurtry, Provincial Attorney General and Solicitor General, and with him, local police and fire chiefs, and Mississauga Mayor Hazel McCallion. Even when the fire had been extinguished, the danger was not over. On Tuesday, chlorine still leaked from the ruptured tanker. On Wednesday, 2 eruptions sent up plumes of gas, and some emergency personnel were overcome. One was firefighter John Engel.
One other firefighter in that area with me complained of nausea, who I sent out promptly. I continued doing my job of connecting lines. And just as I finished up, when I went to take a breath of air, I didn't have anything. It was as if I was standing in a vacuum. I could not get anything at all. I'm breathing on my own more so now. I still do use the oxygen, as any exertion takes everything out of me. I have the chest pains in the bronchia, the upper lungs. The dizziness is still quite prevalent, and the headaches. I've been told this is normal. It will take time before it completely goes away in that respect.
Mississauga found itself in a strange new spotlight, with the eyes of the world focused on the phenomena of a massive evacuation that had been conducted without a hitch, without panic or antagonism. American TV crews who rushed to the scene could barely believe it. While the crisis dragged on, stories of individual heroism came to light, like that of trainman Larry Krupa, who raced from the cab of Train 54's diesel to uncouple the 25 wrecked cars and permit his father-in-law, engineer Keith Pruss, to haul away the rest of the train. Krupa ran into that holocaust with exploding propane flaming all around him. And all he would say later was, "I was warm, but I wanted to save all I could." Mississauga had become a ghost town. Busy thoroughfares, including the Queen Elizabeth Way, eerily silent. Traffic is diverted north to the 401. On the perimeters of the evacuation area, police barricaded streets. Inside, they patrolled constantly, looking for looters who never surfaced. There were isolated break-ins, but the burglary rate for the period of the evacuation was lower than during a normal week in the city. The worst problem, perhaps, was abandoned pets. And for them, hunger was not the only problem.
It could cause the death of 4 puppies that have been stranded in a backyard since Saturday afternoon. It's been pretty cold, below frost level. Without food, there's a chance, pretty probably, they will be dead. Frozen, when they're young, they need food and they need warmth. And the main thing, they need love and attention. And it all goes along as being in a family, in a house, and they'll die if they're just in a backyard. We were ready to go this morning at 10 o'clock, and we've been waiting here ever since. We're not allowed to go in the restricted area until police get here, and as I can see right now, they've just arrived, so we'll be going on our way very shortly. Excuse me, I'm going to go. Sorry.
Come on, there.
Finish her in the bedroom.
Okay. He'll come forth. He'll come forth. There you are.
Okay. Yeah, we're missing one here.
For many, the evacuation hadn't been as simple as hopping into the family car. 3 hospitals were evacuated, with some seriously ill patients moved while still attached to intravenous tubes. Hundreds of ambulances took part in moving newborn babies and occupants of the area's old folks' homes. Thousands more moved to hotels and motels, including the Canadian Pacific's Royal York Hotel. Every vacant room in Toronto was quickly occupied by evacuees. Others moved in with friends. Thousands of others ended up in emergency accommodation hastily arranged by the Red Cross. For the 5 days of the crisis, they were fed, in some cases clothed, and above all, they were safe, even if it wasn't the most comfortable or convenient way to spend the second week of November.
I like to speak my Gaki, my mommy and daddy.
I want to go home. I haven't seen my husband since Saturday. I don't know where he is. I can't stand the dogs and the cats anymore. My daughter is allergic to them.
More than she can cope with now. Her eyes are swollen and she's really uncomfortable. She can't cope with it anymore.
Me, and I'm not staying here. I'm going home. I've had enough of the dogs and the cats and the iguanas. They shouldn't have everybody in here with like this. It's not healthy. Dogs running all over me at nights. I can't sleep. I haven't had one night's sleep since Saturday. I want to go home.
I've been working here since Sunday as an information officer to assist the Red Cross and others in trying to make briefed on what is taking place. Now, we've all done so well here since Sunday that, excuse me, I felt it only fair that we keep you as informed as possible. So I'm going to tell you what they have told me. and I was right in with the minister and the environmental people, and we discussed this very thoroughly. Hang in, there's bad news and there's good news. There is no doubt that you cannot return this evening. They have had some minor problems on the site in the moving of cars. Something has happened. There has been a further escape of gas, and it is now drifting to the south, causing more problems. They are monitoring the situation and will continue to do so. Unable to determine when they can get this capped in a safe enough situation so that all of the people can return. So what we are working on right now, so that your convenience can be better served, and I hope to have confirmation of this within the next 2 hours, we're attempting to move all of you to hotels.
Police still barricaded all roads into the evacuated area and were often hard-pressed to turn away angry residents determined to get back in.
Last night I took his medicine and it doped me down a bit and I slept. I want my own pills.
Well, if it's an absolute necessity, you will be able to...
I don't want to be out again.
You'll be escorted in, of course, you'll be escorted back out.
I don't care. You come with me. I'll show you that my pills are. One is in the kitchen and the other one is in my bedroom.
On Wednesday, 150,000 people farthest from the accident scene were permitted back to their homes. But at the Mavis Road crossing, patching and draining the tanker car of its liquid chlorine was proving more difficult than expected. A big rubber patch intended to seal the gash in the tanker car didn't cut off the entire seepage of chlorine. It had to be attempted several times before the seal finally held. Furthermore, draining the car was complicated by a coating of ice that had formed inside the tank and which threatened to fall into the volatile chlorine, setting off a new emission of the deadly gas.
The concern is that the ice, the weight of the ice itself, may actually cause the ice to collapse. So it would sort of probably fall inward, or it might actually just break up in pieces. If this occurred, the ice would cause the chlorine to splash, and there would be the chlorine that was stirred up would start to vaporize very quickly. At the same time, the temperature at this point is a little bit warmer than the temperature which would be in this space here. If the ice broke, the temperature would, the air here would mix with the air here, and the temperature would increase fairly suddenly. And the concern is that this increased temperature plus the chlorine exposed would cause evaporation to proceed much more quickly. So if that happened, there is a possibility, we believe it is not a likely possibility, but nevertheless it is a possibility that the vapor could be generated very quickly. You might overpressurize the car and cause the hatch over here to lift for a short time. We've been using words like burp.
Nevertheless, the drainage went ahead, slowly emptying the car. Finally, at 8 p.m. on Friday, almost 5 full days after the evacuation order, the last of the evacuees were permitted to return, and the Mississauga crisis was over. But the end signaled a storm of criticism against the CPR, which quickly opened a compensation office. It paid out-of-pocket expenses to evacuees, and within a couple of weeks had distributed more than $3 million. There were those who believed that when it was all added up, government costs, private losses, business losses, Mississauga would have cost $90 million.
We do have 2 rail lines running through our city, and we are in the heart of a very busy area of the province of Ontario. And therefore, you know, I can assure you that following this and after the necessary investigations have been made, I'm hoping that we can convince the level of government responsible for stricter regulations to get on with the job.
Oh, I do enjoy an evening with a little light entertainment. But when your video heads get dirty, you lose your picture. Not a pretty sight. Happily, this new Polaroid video cassette will help you. It actually cleans your heads as it plays, so dirty heads needn't haunt you. New Polaroid video cassettes. Get the picture?
Buy 4, get 1 free. Details at your dealer.
There's a brand new club in town, Wendy's new chicken club. And Wendy's doesn't serve just any chicken in this club, only boneless breasted chicken with sizzling strips of bacon, cool iceberg lettuce, juicy tomato, all jazzed up with mayo. Consider this an invitation to Wendy's Chicken Club.
That's fresh, that's class, that's Wendy's.
It'll take years, probably, before the blame and the responsibility have been laid and the compensation negotiated through the courts. Perhaps these settlements and the financial losses represent the real Mississauga disaster. But I think we learned a lot about ourselves during that dreadful week. The fact that 250,000 people acted calmly, rationally, and in good spirits in the face of what could have been a ghastly tragedy reveals a lot about our Canadian qualities as a people. I'm Peter Truman.
For each load of deadly gases like the one that finally blew, that meets with such a fate upon the rails, there must be 100,000 more that quietly slip through. God help us if the system ever fails. Is it up to us to criticize the wisdom of the men who send such threats to plague our daily lives? Or should we simply hold our peace and turn our backs again and hope by chance humanity survives? There's 1,000,000 miles of rail between the mountains and the sea, and the mighty railroad touches everyone. Like the night the fire that lit the midnight sky for all to see, left a cloud that blanked the Mississauga sun. Like the night the fire that lit the midnight sky for all to see, left a cloud that blanked the Mississauga sun.
Crystal suspects that someone with a camera is out to sabotage her marriage to Blake. And Alexis and Dominique seek to destroy each other in the business world. Global's got Dynasty in a half an hour. And tomorrow, things are hopping on the hill as Hunter's stolen Winnebago becomes the scene of a dangerous siege. Global's got Emmy award-winning drama on Hill Street Blues tomorrow at 10. Stay tuned for Comedy Right Now, ER, next. Provincial officials get tough with draft beer sales. Details and more on the national news at 11 here on the Global Television Network.